Let's pull back the curtain on a world that's operating right alongside ours, but totally in the shadows. We're talking about illegal markets. This is a massive, hidden chunk of the global economy, and honestly, how it all works is just fascinating.
So just how big are we talking here? Well, get this. The estimates put the global illegal economy at over $1 trillion annually. Yeah, that's not some tiny fringe operation. We're talking about an economic force on a global scale, bigger than the entire economy of many countries.
And that right there, that's the big puzzle, isn't it? I mean, we just assume that markets need rules to work. You need contracts, you need to know your property is protected, you need courts for when things go wrong, and police to back it all up. So the question is, how on earth does a trillion-dollar economy even exist, let alone thrive, when it has none of that?
Okay, to really get our heads around this, we need to talk about something called coordination problems. It's a term economic sociologists use, but it's pretty simple, really. It's just the basic set of challenges that any market, whether it's legal or illegal, has to solve just to be able to function at all.
And this really gets to the core of it. Think about it. In a normal legal market, the government is kind of like your safety net. But in an illegal market, the government is your biggest enemy. It's not there to protect your deal. It's actively trying to shut you down and throw you in prison. That creates this huge cloud of uncertainty over everything.
So it turns out pretty much every market boils down to solving three big problems. First up is the value problem. Basically, how do you know the thing you're buying is actually what they say it is? Then there's the competition problem. What do you do about your rivals? And finally, maybe the biggest one, the cooperation problem. How can you possibly trust the other person to actually follow through on the deal?
And you can see the difference right here. In legal markets, we've got all these fancy institutions to make sure people cooperate. Contracts, courts, police, the whole shebang. But in illegal markets, it's way more basic. It all comes down to personal reputation, your word. And if that doesn't work, it's the threat of violence. There's no one to appeal to.
So what this all meant, for a very long time, was that the experts were all pretty much in agreement. Because you had to rely on personal trust, and there was always this constant danger, illegal markets just had to be small. They had to be local, where everybody kind of knows everybody. Because how could you possibly build trust at a large scale with total strangers?
But then, something came along that just shattered all those assumptions. A digital anomaly showed up and it completely defied all that logic. It changed everything we thought we knew about how these shadow economies could work.
I mean, for decades, this was just the way it was. Everyone accepted that illegal markets were small, local, and pretty inefficient. That was the reality. But then came February 2011. And that reality just broke.
And for most of the world, this is how they found out about it, through these shocking headlines, like this one from Gawker. A new website had launched on the dark web. It was called Silk Road, and it promised to be a totally anonymous global marketplace for, pretty much anything you can imagine.
And I mean, just look at these numbers. In just a couple of years, Silk Road had over 100,000 buyers. It processed something like 1.2 million transactions. The total sales, an estimated $1.2 billion. Think about that. This wasn't small, it wasn't local, and it was all done anonymously. According to everything we knew, this should have been impossible.
So that's the billion-dollar question, right? How did they pull this off? How in the world did a massive global marketplace full of strangers solve those core problems, trust, quality, cooperation, when nobody knew who anyone else was and no one ever met in person?
Well, the answer is as brilliant as it is simple. The founder of Silk Road didn't just build a website. He used technology to build his own private digital state. It had its own rules, its own institutions, its own way of creating order and trust from chaos.
So let's break down how. First, remember that value problem? How do you know if the stuff you're buying is any good? Well, instead of word-of-mouth reputation, Silk Road basically ripped a page from eBay's playbook. It created a user review system. Anyone, completely anonymously, could rate the sellers and the products. All of a sudden, you had this global, crowdsourced way of building trust.
Okay, and what about the cooperation problem? How do you make sure you get what you paid for? This was the real stroke of genius. Instead of relying on the threat of violence, Silk Road built an automated escrow system using Bitcoin. So when you bought something, your money didn't go to the seller. It went to the website, which held on to it. Only when you confirmed you got your package did the site release the payment. Simple. No delivery, no money.
It literally replaced muscle with computer code. So you see what happened here. This is the key takeaway. Silk Road used technology to build digital versions of all the things it was missing from the real world. It had its own quality control, its own way to enforce deals, even its own system for handling disputes. It was, for all intents and purposes, its own private, self-governing, anonymous state.
But here's the thing. No matter how clever and self-contained your digital world is, it still has to exist inside the physical world. And that meant there was always going to be a showdown, a confrontation with the most powerful institution out there, the real-world government.
And in the end, the state won. After this huge, multi-year investigation, the FBI took the site down in October 2013. They found and arrested its founder, Ross Ulbricht, who ended up with a life sentence. And yeah, other sites tried to take its place, but they got shut down too. It was a clear message about the limits of this kind of digital power.
The story of Silk Road it's incredible. It proved that technology can create order and trust in what should be the most chaotic environments imaginable. But it also leaves us with this massive, lingering question. Technology can obviously build these powerful new ways of organizing ourselves, but can it ever truly escape the power of the state? That's a question we're probably going to be dealing with for a long, long time.